The deal to shut down San Onofre was crafted at secret illegal meetings, a judge rules. And the real cost of that controversial deal to ratepayers is billions more than utility operators have stated. Plus, the top boss of the North County Transit District faces lawsuits for harassment and age discrimination. I'm Mark Sauer. The KPBS Roundtable starts now. Welcome to our discussion of the week's top stories. I'm Mark Sauer. Joining me at the KPBS Roundtable today are KPBS investigative reporter Amitha Sharma. Hi, Amitha.
Hi.
Good to have you here today. Reporter Jeff McDonald of the San Diego Union-Tribune Watchdog team. Hi, Jeff.
Hello, Mark.
Good to see you back again. And reporter Brad Racino with iNewsSource. Hi, Brad.
Hey, Mark.
And that's three investigative reporters with us today. So we're going to start with new developments in a story we recently covered on the Roundtable. It's the battle between UC San Diego and USC over a long-running multi-million-dollar Alzheimer's study. It's run by UCSD. This week, pharmaceutical giant Eli Lilly announced it will move tens of millions in funds for Alzheimer's research from UC San Diego to USC. Earlier, I talked with David Wagner, KPBS science and technology reporter, about what this means. David, why did Eli Lilly decide to move its funds for this trial away from UC San Diego?
Well, Mark, I think they want to stick with the guy they know. This whole legal fight started when Alzheimer's researcher Paul Edison left his post at UC San Diego for a new position at USC. Edison has been closely involved with Lilly's trial, which is testing a drug on people in early stages of Alzheimer's. So these are patients whose brains show evidence of the disease, but who don't yet have symptoms of cognitive decline. Lilly's decision here suggests that they'd rather work with Edison than UC San Diego on this particular trial.
So how much money are we talking about here?
We're talking about tens of millions of dollars. Lilly had pledged up to $76 million to UC San Diego for this trial. But now they're talking about shifting those dollars over to USC and Paul Edison.
And what will this mean for UC San Diego's study?
Well, UC San Diego officials say they're only losing one piece of the pie here. They've fought hard in court to stay in control of the program that oversees this trial and many others. A judge did recently prevent Paul Edison from taking that central program with him to USC. So UC San Diego continues to manage trial data, but they have lost one of the major trials producing that data.
And this act by Lilly strengthens USC's move into San Diego?
I would think it does. It shows that a major drug company believes USC is better staffed for managing this kind of study. Here's what Paul Edison told KPBS when Eli Lilly announced their decision earlier this week.
I believe this is a win for the study, for the field, and for the participants who so generously volunteer to join such a study.
Going forward, it will be interesting to see where other drug companies funding different trials decide to place their money.
Okay, thanks, David.
Thanks, Mark.
And we'll continue to follow developments in the UCSD-USC conflict. All right, let's turn to our first topic on the Roundtable today. New revelations in the troubled multi-billion-dollar deal, or billion-dollar settlement, over paying for the shutdown of the San Onofre nuclear generating station. Majority owner is Southern California Edison. Minority owner is San Diego Gas and Electric. The plant closed in January 2012 following a radiation leak. And there's been trouble ever since about who would pay what costs for that shutdown. Now, Jeff, let's start with the judge for the Public Utilities Commission. What was she considering? What was she looking at here in this ruling?
She was looking at some complaint that had been filed by some of the other stakeholders in the proceeding that criticized Edison for meeting in secret with some regulators, including former President Michael Peavy. That's the meeting from March of 2013 over in Warsaw, Poland, where they sketched out the framework for a deal that was eventually adopted last year by the Commission.
Okay, and that kind of ex parte meeting, that's not supposed to happen. It's supposed to be a shine the sunshine on this process. Right?
The public's business is supposed to be done in public. Yes, that's not supposed to happen. And when these meetings do happen, these ex parte meetings, they're supposed to be disclosed to all the other parties in the proceeding within 3 days so that everybody's on the same page and everybody knows who had access to the decision makers. That's not what happened in Warsaw. They disclosed that meeting earlier this year after state investigators raided Michael Peavy's house and found the notes from that meeting in Poland.
Okay, so a long time had passed, certainly more than the 3-day limit. Let's do a little housekeeping here, a little background. What is the Public Utilities Commission? It's kind of this agency that maybe not a lot of people are aware of.
It's a quasi-judicial state department agency that adjudicates rate hikes for water, electricity. They regulate transportation, railroads in the state of California. Their mission is to maintain safe and reliable service at reasonable rates. So there's a lot of latitude in their mission. The knock on the PUC, certainly in the last year, has been that they're overly favorable to the utilities and those they regulate, rather than the people and the consumers.
Yeah, so they're supposed to be a watchdog. You're supposed to be looking out for our interests here and the public's interest. So what violations did the judge file here? First of all, tell us about the judge. She's not a Superior Court judge here. She's part of the process within that agency. Right?
She works for the commission. She's an administrative law judge, so she has the responsibilities of any judge. And she adjudicates different proceedings, and they have a number of ALJs on their staff, and she's one that got assigned to the San Onofre case. She was asked to review more than 70 communications that Edison ended up reporting or disclosing, and found that 10 of them constituted formal violations of the ex parte rule. So that's what she issued this week, was a ruling finding that Edison had violated on 10 occasions this ban against private communications without disclosing them.
All right, and tell us a little bit about Michael Peavy. He's the former head of the PUC and his role in all of this.
Well, he was the president of the PUC, a very powerful post, controls tens of billions of dollars in ratepayer spending every year. He was a former Edison executive, so when he was appointed, there were concerns that maybe he would favor his old employer. That may have proved to be the case, at least with the San Onofre settlement, because he helped negotiate they call it a framework for a settlement of the San Onofre investigation over in Warsaw, out of sight of public, which is apparently improper and the subject of now 2 different criminal investigations. Interestingly, he's married to a state senator in the State House. So.
And how did the Union Tribune, how did you guys find out about this whole Warsaw meeting?
When they got the search warrant for his house, they had to file
the state attorney general's investigators.
The investigators. They filed the search warrant return, and on the search warrant returns, they have to list all the documents they seized from the home. Now, I noticed when I was going through the list of things that they'd recovered, it said RSG notes on Hotel Bristol stationery, and I thought RSG has to be replacement steam generators, and I didn't know where the Hotel Bristol was because there are. Who knew? But there are hundreds in the world.
One in San Diego.
There's one in San Francisco too, which is where the PUC lives. So we didn't report that they'd been in Warsaw until after we reported that the investigation was now reaching into San Onofre, because previous to that it had been limited to Pacific Gas Electric up in San Francisco, which had been responsible for a pipeline that exploded and killed 8 people. But when they found the RSG notes, that linked the San Onofre case to the overall criminal case that the investigators had begun late last year.
So, Mitha, we started by saying this is kind of an obscure agency for a lot of folks here. Tell us, put it in perspective, why are these secret meetings and this, it looks like a deal set out behind closed doors, why is that so troubling, or should it be troubling for us ratepayers?
Well, it's troubling because it's done in secret, and the PUC's job is to safeguard power for us, to protect the consumer interest, safeguard power at a reasonable rate and in a safe manner, and to regulate the utilities. And in the case of the meeting in Poland, it appears, at least based on what Jeff has reported and what other people have reported, that Edison had a great deal of power and influence in how this deal was reached. And it's interesting, Jeff hasn't mentioned it, but it wasn't until Jeff reported on that meeting in Poland that Edison actually filed a formal ex parte notice about the meeting, and that was 2 years later.
They got that on there. We're going to get to that deal in a second and break that down. I did want to ask one more question. The judge herself, Melanie Darling, she's come under fire for not going far enough here, and not, in this ruling. I mean, it sounds pretty dramatic, but she has her critics.
She's come under fire on 2 fronts. One, for not being tough enough, and that she's only found 10 cases where Edison violated the ex parte disclosure rules. but she's also come under fire and asked to be, she's been the subject of a recusal motion because she's engaged in ex parte communications with Edison herself. We reported this, I think, in May. I get mixed up when we reported
but earlier this year.
But earlier this year, and we obtained emails that show she was trading them with Edison executives and discussing the open San Onofre investigation, which is unusual to say the least, that a judge would be contacting one of the parties in a significant case.
And it should also be noted that in the search warrants that were issued back in June, they're asking for information on her role in this case as well. So she's the target as well.
Yeah, they want her emails.
Okay. All right, let's shift now to the settlement plan itself. Now, it's been under fire for some time. Now, Mitha, your story this week explained how the official total of $3.3 billion, that's the stated of what this is going to cost to utility customers. It vastly understates the actual tab. Now, here's a clip from your report which totals up the actual cost.
There's about $1 billion for the Decommissioning Fund that's already been paid, plus nearly $600 million for the steam generators. Then $3.3 billion in the settlement agreement to cover some of Edison's lost profit from San Onofre. About $5.5 billion for interim replacement electricity and plants being built to make up for San Onofre's power generation. If you add up those numbers, you get $10 billion.
All right, so that does lay it out fairly clearly here. But the stated cost is only a third of that. I mean, how do we get away, or how do the utilities get away with saying it's only going to cost this much to ratepayers from this much larger number?
Well, we went beyond what's listed in the settlement agreement. We tried to add up everything it would cost ratepayers, starting with the Decommissioning Fund. The Decommissioning Fund actually began collecting money back in the early 1980s when two of San Onofre's reactors first opened for business. And between then and now, there's been $4.2 billion that's accumulated in that fund. Now, Edison maintains that of that $4.2 billion, only $1 billion has been contributed by customers. We could not independently verify that number, so we used their number. Then there is like another $1.1 billion that we added up that customers would be paying for replacement electricity in the interim between the time that San Onofre closed and the time that new power plants will be built. Now, those new power plants that are being built to make up for the lost generation at San Onofre, the cost of that is about $4.4 billion. So again, that $3.3 billion refers to the settlement agreement whose framework was developed in secret by former Edison former PUC President Peavy and Edison executive Pickett in Poland in secret 2 years ago. And that's been cast as covering the shutdown costs. It's actually meant to cover or to guarantee that Edison and SDG&E still get a rate of return on their investment on San Onofre, even though the plant is no longer generating electricity.
All right, so former City Attorney Mike Aguirre is suing now. He's trying to get this whole settlement deal scrapped. He thinks it's just a bad deal for ratepayers. We got a clip here. Here's how he described the situation that ratepayers are in.
Like, you don't have you bought a car, now the car has proven to be defective, so you can't drive the car, and they're saying, well, good, we're going to reduce the rate on the loan that you took out at the bank. So you don't have to pay, 5% for the loan. You only have to pay 2%. And you say, well, wait a second. I don't have the car. Why am I paying for anything?
All right. So he's kind of mocking this idea that ratepayers somehow got a refund in all of this, right?
Right. Edison says that, look, hey, it's not just ratepayers aren't simply paying $3.3 billion. They're getting a $1 billion refund. Well, that refund doesn't show up on a customer bill per se. It shows up as a reduction in the amount of interest that customers are charged on Edison's investment in San Onofre.
Okay, so it looks to me, after reading your stories and looking at all this as just a ratepayer and an interested party, that we being the ratepayers, are going to pay the lion's share under this deal
70%.
to kind of make these stockholders whole or mostly whole on this. Now, the folks who invested in these companies, they had a choice. You and I don't have a choice. You move in, if Edison or SDG&E, Edison is your rate supplier, you're stuck with them, you're paying for them, you can't go somewhere else, you can't go to another company, but yet you're going to foot the bill because the investors aren't going to take a haircut.
Not only that, the commissioners themselves are almost perfectly unaccountable. If ratepayers have a grievance, they can take it to San Francisco and complain to the PUC, but they get ignored routinely. They can take it to their lawmakers, but their lawmakers aren't entirely effective, even getting documents out of the PUC. They can take their complaint to the governor's office. I've asked the governor's office repeatedly to weigh in on this, and they simply won't talk about it. So it's tough to say where a consumer can go for some kind of remedy, but you're supposed to be able to go to your elected officials.
And the laws don't seem to be applied in this situation. I mean, Assemblyman Rendon has asked the PUC repeatedly to turn over documents or compel Edison to turn over emails and other documents concerning how this settlement was reached in Poland and beyond. And he simply hasn't turned them over.
Well, they haven't given them to the investigators either, and the ratepayers are funding the criminal defense lawyers at the tune of $882 an hour, up to $5+ million. So it's a pretty unusual situation, and I think everybody in San Diego County certainly is waiting for some kind of reaction out of the State House to fix this.
All right, we got a short time left on this segment. I did want to get into why some people think this deal may unravel. Now, we had some ratepayer advocates, some consumer groups who did sign off on the deal, but some of them have reconsidered that, and some are still sticking with it. Explain where we're at on that.
Well, the Utility Reform Network, which is a consumer advocacy group based in San Francisco, supported this deal, signed off on the agreement. They have since withdrawn their support for what they describe as extensive backdoor communications between PV and Edison. Then there is the Office of Ratepayer Advocates, which is a division within the PUC, which again is supposed to safeguard consumer interests. I contacted them a couple of weeks ago and said, look, you know, you've got this state investigation, criminal investigation into how this deal was reached. You've got all these revelations about these private meetings between Edison and the Commission. Are you still in favor of this deal? And they said, yep, you know, there haven't been any indictments yet.
All right, so last word on this, Jeff. We mentioned earlier on the Attorney General and the investigators were acting on search warrants and all. Where are we with that? Are we going to see some criminal action, or who knows?
Who knows? They don't discuss their ongoing investigation. I think there's plenty of evidence already in the public arena for that to lead someplace, at least to have questions asked under oath, which would be a nice change. So I don't know where it's going. I've never encountered such a dysfunctional equation in my journalism career.
And I would just add this, that PV is very powerful in Northern California, and he's got very powerful friends.
And where is he now, just for the record?
He lives in La Cañada, which is an LA suburb.
And his job now is?
He's retired from the PUC and his public service, but he still serves UCLA on a advisory board there. Okay. And he's married to a state senator, of course, who is working right now.
All right. Well, we'll look forward to much more reporting on this as we move forward. We'll shift gears now. The PUC isn't the only agency under fire in San Diego County. NCTD, the North County Transit District, has been heavily criticized in a federal audit, and it's currently being sued by ex-employees. Specific targetable lawsuits has been the Transit District CEO, Michael Tucker. Brad, start with the lawsuits. What are these ex-employees alleging there?
Sure. It's Matthew Tucker.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. The lawsuits are, there's two in a row, one in 2012, one in 2013. They both allege the same thing, which is age and gender discrimination when it comes to hiring and firing. So this latest one by a former employee, Virginia Moeller, alleges that she was unfairly targeted for layoff and then was not rehired per internal policies that mandate that people who are laid off have priority when it comes to rehiring.
All right, and how many now, besides her, how many ex-employees are claiming discrimination, bullying, Tucker?
Well, there's been two lawsuits claiming this, and then in this most recent one, in Moeller's lawsuit, there were two former managers at the agency who were deposed and then had declarations included in it. And they both alleged seeing the same things and witnessing the same kind of behavior by Mr. Tucker.
Okay, now there was a massive turnover of NCTD employees. How many are we talking about?
There's a lot. We tried last year to get a tally of how many, and we came up against a roadblock. At North County, they wouldn't give us documents, so we tried to piece it together. And over the years, it looks like since we took it from when Matt Tucker arrived in 2009 until now, it looks like at least a few dozen of, and these are high managers. These are people who are in charge of running like the positive train control and grants and contracts and safety. And a lot of these people have turned over multiple times. There's one position for ADA, for disability oversight, that turned over, I think it was 5 times in 2 years. So there's people in and out constantly. And these people are being paid hefty severance packages when they leave. They have to sign non-disclosure agreements so that they can't come out and talk about their time at North County. And then they're also being replaced by people that are being found through headhunting firms. There's one in particular that NCTD likes to use a lot that is extremely costly. Some of them $30,000, $40,000 to replace a person. And this is happening time and time again.
Yeah, because of the high turnover. Now, till now, it's been very hard getting any of these critics to talk. They're citing confidential settlements and some of these legal actions and all. Now, so where do these new revelations? We've finally got kind of a spotlight shined on some of the specifics here. Where do they come from?
This comes right out of the lawsuit. This is the first time that we've actually had managers say these things on the record. In our years, depositions. Yeah. In our years of reporting on this, we've talked to a lot of people, but again, we can't put their names to it because they would lose all these severance packages. So this is the first time that we've had it. There have been times in the past where we've gotten a couple employees who have told us. We also got a confidential resignation letter that was submitted in 2012 by the district's chief technology officer that laid all of this out as well. That the same allegations, same age and gender-based discrimination and harassment. So that's how we've pieced it all together.
And Matthew Tucker, what does he say about the allegations according to these depositions?
Well, we tried to get him to comment. He won't talk to us. He hasn't talked to us for a very long time. His lawyers responded and said, all of their side of things is in their motion, which is in court, which just pretty much seeks to dismiss what these managers are saying that it's they're disgruntled ex-employees and whatever they say has no bearing and that it can't be proven and that they don't believe them to be factual statements. But that's pretty much it.
And of course, this is an agency that's overseen by a board of directors, and these are the supervisors and looking for the public interest, presumably. What do the board of directors for the transit district have to say?
For almost every story we've done, we've reached out to the board of directors. These are 8 representatives. They're all elected representatives from each city that make up the North County Transit District, North County plus a county supervisor. It used to be Bill Horn. He's still on the board as an alternate. But out of all this time, we've only had 2 people who have ever responded to us, Tony Krantz and Mark Aguilera. And in this recent story, Mr. Krantz wrote to us and just said that he will not be commenting on this, but he will once the thing has worked its way through court. But overall, we haven't heard anything from any of these people. No matter what we ask them, they will never respond. They will never go on the record. They won't talk to us.
They're kind of hamstrung because of the ongoing litigation. But is there any evidence they're doing anything in closed session to reconsider their choice of Mr. Tucker as their executive?
The only evidence in closed session is that he gets a lot of bonuses and raises. What
are the specifics on that the board has given him recently?
I don't have the exact. I think it's about he was guaranteed $10,000 raises every year for the next 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, that's what
I think this year he'll be making like $270,000 plus he got a $20,000 bonus. There is no evidence that they are looking into anything. And again, I think this speaks a lot to how these boards are structured. These are people who maybe put in an hour or 2 a month looking at these kind of agencies. They're doing their own stuff in their own cities. And to come into these gigantic $100 million agencies and try and see what's going on at all different levels, I don't know if they even have the capacity or the time to do that. But I'm not making excuses for them. I'm just saying that's...
They only know what the staff tells them.
They only know what's presented to them at these board meetings.
Now, you've been covering NCTD for a couple of years now. You've uncovered some major flaws. Can you list kind of the high points of those?
Sure. We started covering them, I think, in 2013, but it was in 2012 where they went through a FTA review, a Federal Transit Administration review, and these are every 3 years. They monitor compliance with grant activity, so North County gets a lot of grants from the federal government, and they have to abide by certain rules. So the FTA comes in and audits them. They found more deficiencies in 2012 than at any point in NCTD's history. That same year, NCTD's contract department was also audited, not by the Federal Transit Administration, but by a contractor that they had that just did it on the side. And they found deficiencies all over the place. And that's important because North County, when Tucker came in, he said he's changing it from a transportation agency to a contract management agency. He laid off 80% of the employees, and now almost everything is run by contractors. So they're really just oversight and management. Their staff is like 100 or 120 people when it was 500 or 600. So this hub that oversees all of that was found to be deficient in almost every area that these contractors looked at. The next year in 2013, the Sprinter shut down due to faulty brake rotors for months. That was its own thing. Yeah. Then we also found that the district security force was completely untrained and unprepared for anything they were doing. North County audited their contractor on that and found all that to be true. They gave them an order to comply within however much time it was, audited them again and found they still hadn't complied and cut that multi-million-dollar contract. This year, the FTA did another review 3 years later, found even more deficiencies than in 2012, so it's even worse than at any point in its history. So the list goes on.
Well, we're going to have to leave it there, and we'll look for more reporting and follow-ups as we move along. That does wrap up another week of stories at the KPBS Roundtable. I'd like to thank my guests, Amitha Sharma of KPBS News, Jeff McDonald of the San Diego Union Tribune, and Brad Racino from iNewsSource. A reminder, all the stories we discussed today are available on our website, kpbs.org. I'm Mark Sauer. Thanks for joining us today on the Roundtable.